It's been a while since we last posted a video, and that's because we wanted to put as many features and improvements into this progress update video as possible. We didn't get exactly everything we wanted done in time, like yet another update to Mistwinter based character creator, but we still have a lot of things to show off. The game we're talking about is the visual novel RPG Mistwinter Bay that I, Lev Unknown, and my sister Woglewu have been working on for a few years now. I'll talk more about the massive milestone and show some statistics of just how much content is available in the full game with just Townsfolk stories, but before that, let's take a look at some of the improvements and other updates we've done to the game recently. The first improvement I'll talk about is the most important and requested one. Ever since the first version of Mistwinter based demo, the game has had problems with loading times, making it almost unplayable on some computers. When loading, the player would only be shown a black screen in the oldest versions, then a black screen with text that said loading. Neither of those versions is fun to look at or give any sort of indication that something is actually happening. For a long time we thought it was impossible to improve the loading times in a meaningful way. Those thoughts came from the way GameMaker Studio 2 handles texture pages and how the game freezes when they're loaded and so on. Now, I'll admit that this is still a problem and I'm still not that fond of how GameMaker handles textures and sprites, but I'll also admit that I have been at fault as well. I'm not a programmer, but I handle all of the game's programming, which means that I'll have to rely on GameMaker's official documentation a lot of the time, as well as forum posts discussing loading and unloading textures. But since our game is quite different from most types of games made with this game engine, the suggestions and recommendations didn't really work for us. So I ended up reworking how a lot of the game's texture pages were grouped and when, where and how they were loaded to fit how Mistwinter Bay works. By doing so, I managed to get the worst loading time entering the town view down from several seconds to being instant. The same goes for all other types of loading times, including when you open menus. There was a slight freeze when opening some menus before, but now it's smooth like butter. I've also shortened one particular loading time when you completed an event by making the event completed and new month sounds a lot shorter. As a compromise to ensure that the game doesn't run out of memory, there's slightly longer loading times when entering the character creator, wardrobe, and when loading a saved game. But even though those loading times can take a few seconds, it doesn't feel that long, because I've also added a loading bar to show the loading progress and some text during the long loading times to keep the player occupied. First there's a gameplay tip, then some information related to the game's lore. Both of these lines of text are picked randomly every time. These improvements alone make the full version of Mistwinter Bay a completely different experience from the demos, and that's just the start of our improvements. Another thing that some people have commented on is the clunkiness of navigating through menus. The clunkiness comes from having to cycle through every page of the menu to get to where you want to go. Take the character roster as an example. If you had 10 characters living in your town and you wanted to see information about the 5th one, you would have to click the arrow button up to 4 times depending on which character the menu opened up with first. Now, all of that clunkiness is gone with the introduction of these buttons. Clicking one of these instantly takes you to the menu entry you want to look at. We've added these buttons to the Townsfolk roster, Foreign Leaders roster, Country menu in the map view, and in the new and improved Buildings menu. You can still cycle through entries with the arrows down here if you want to, but I suspect that the square buttons will be used quite frequently, especially in character menus. Every menu that has these buttons can also be sorted based on categories that the player chooses. Sorting buttons means that only entries that follow specific criteria will have their buttons show up. Let me show you how it works in the roster. When I click this arrow, the sorting menu pops up and displays all of the buttons with categories I can sort by. If I click on the first button, which is to sort the characters by gender, you'll see that all buttons of characters that don't fit the current sorting requirement, which is to be a male character, disappears. I can then add more filters to the sorting by clicking some of the other buttons, for example the religion button, sorting by a Valorist characters. Clicking the religion button again will change the religion to voidism and only voidist male characters are shown. Since there are 8 categories to sort by in the roster, you can have 8 filters active at once, but the odds that any button shows up in those cases is pretty low. The sorting you were last on is saved when you open the roster next time, but you can easily cancel all of the active sorting by clicking on the arrow to retract the sorting menu. Pretty neat, right? As previously mentioned, all menus that have these square types of buttons can be sorted. All of those menus have different categories that they can be sorted by. The character roster can be sorted by gender, race, which means if they're humans or elementals, nothing else, country of birth, social class, religion, reputation, hearts, and special relationships, for example if they're forever faithful. The foreign leader roster can be sorted in the same ways, minus the country of birth and social class, since those things are self-explanatory in this menu. The country menu can be sorted by if it's a human or elemental country and which primary religion it has. The buildings menu can be sorted by built or unbuilt buildings, and if it's buildable, replaceable, or upgradable, if it can be afforded, if it's a special building, which basically means it has a unique bonus menu, and which type of resource it produces. Speaking of the buildings menu, if you played the demo, you probably noticed that both built buildings and empty lots are now in the same menu. We got some feedback after the Steam Next Fest about how tedious it was to find which buildings you could afford and not, and we completely agree, it sucked. Now we've made that a lot easier in multiple ways. The first way is by putting all of the buildings together in one menu. Earlier you had to click on every empty lot to see if you could afford that building, but now you can click on any structure, built or not, and it will take you to the same menu, which you can sort however you want. That way you won't miss an empty lot that might be hidden away somewhere either. Another improvement we did was to indicate which lots you can afford to build on in the general town view by adding 2 icons hovering over the lot in question. The first icon shows which building it relates to, since some empty lots can have 2 buildings that may have different resource requirements, and the Valor's shrine or temple can both be upgraded and replaced at the same time. By the way, if there are 2 buildings that can be built on an empty lot, their icons are divided by a line on the button in the buildings menu. The second icon indicates if it's an upgrade, displayed by an arrow, or a new building or replacement, displayed by a checkmark. We also added a special icon above the inn if there's a visitor there who you haven't met yet. If you're thinking that these icons ruin the look of the town, don't worry, you can turn the icons on or off in the settings at any time. Yet another thing we did to make it more obvious if you can build something was to show it in the menu for that specific building. If you can't afford it, the build button is now unclickable, and there's text in several places indicating that you don't have enough resources and also which resources you're low on. This goes for upgrade and replace menus as well. The keen-eyed might have noticed that this button shows up if there aren't enough resources to build something. Clicking the button takes you directly to a special version of the new trade menu. The old trade menu was both a bit buggy and difficult to understand, even for me, and I made it, so I remade it from scratch. It has several changes and improvements. It's now easy to see which side of the menu is meant for what. You can trade multiple resources at once and see how each of them will be affected at the bottom. The trade rate, which is how many resources you can buy and sell per arrow click, is also shown, and the best trade deal for each resource is clearly displayed with a star. The star is put on resources you can buy to indicate that that resource is the cheapest to buy regardless of which resource you're selling with the current trade partner you have selected. There are 4 total trade partners, and the best deals for each resource is shown next to the button of the partner who has that deal. The Empire of Strana, which is the trade partner you start with, have the worst deals in all categories, and the other partners specialize on their own things. The basic version of the trade menu looks like this, but if you enter the trade menu from a building, you'll get these additional squares. They show how many resources of each type you're currently missing to be able to afford whichever building you enter the menu from. Let's say that you want to build the tavern. If you enter the trade menu from the tavern, you see that you're short on gold. You sell some stone for gold and immediately see the gold you're missing go down to 0. Confirm the trade, exit the menu, and you're back at the tavern again, and now you can afford it. This feature has made both building and trading a lot easier. Now that we built the tavern, we had the tavern master Leith move in. In the demo, you had to go back to the throne room to see who he is, but now we can check that in the town view. This bar of buttons is a new feature, and it's present in the town view, throne room, map, and dialogue. It holds separate buttons for the 3 menus, Townsfolk roster, foreign leaders roster, and encyclopedia, that were previously grouped into one single button. The button for the map is there too. We also split the buttons for the laws, taxes, and guard presence menus. We gave all buttons buttons as well as the trade button icons that match the menu's topic. We've also added some icons that relate to sorting next to information text in some menus. If you're really paying attention, you might have noticed that there are now 3 pages in the character rosters instead of 2. That's because we've added a new mechanic called Notable Relationships. In short, this feature means that all foreign leaders and townsfolk have opinions about other characters and will react if something happens to that character. We'll talk about this feature more in depth in another video. There's also another character related feature that gives townsfolk opinion on whether or not they're willing to take someone's life. There are situations where the player gets the opportunity to murder people, and anyone who lives in the town can be tasked to carry out the murder. Now, in a game that puts a lot of focus on characters' individuality and unique personalities, it doesn't make a lot of sense that all characters will kill someone and not complain. Still, the player shouldn't be unable to choose certain options that are presented to them just because they don't have the right townsfolk for it, which in this case means townsfolk who are okay with murder. As a compromise, every character now has an opinion on which situations they're prepared to take someone's life in. If that situation is more cold-hearted than they're prepared for, they will lose reputation, but the action will still be carried out. There are 3 opinions. The townsperson is never okay with killing anyone, or they are okay with doing it in self-defense, or they're okay with murder. This feature not only gives the townsfolk more depth, but it also gives some complexity to the gameplay. Now the player has yet another incentive to know what type of people they have in town, or they might end up sending someone who's not okay with killing out as an assassin and will get hated by them afterwards. If you think this sounds like an annoying feature, don't worry too much though. Murders are fairly rare in Mistwinter Bay unless you actively seek them out, and a majority of the townsfolk are okay with killing in self-defense. We've discussed many features in depth so far, so let's do some faster showcases now. When hovering over the monthly production of resources on the resource bars, it now displays where those resources are coming from and any expenses you may have. Some resources like coins have unique categories, but all resources have buildings, items and other as income and items and other as expenses. There are new reputation pop-ups based on groups of characters. The groups are social classes and religion. This means that you will no longer have to sit through every character's reputation change when building buildings and so on. There are also new pop-ups when guard presence, monthly resource production or population is changed, but they aren't always shown. For example, there's no pop-ups like that when you build a new building. Since the sovereign you play as in the game is a pretty unique type of noble, there's now a fairly extensive explanation of what a sovereign is early on in the game's intro, so that there's no confusion about what to expect in terms of interactions with other characters. For the same reason, we also added some changes to the description of Jack and Sophia in the letters sent by the sovereign's father, making it clear that they have a much more familial relationship than that of master and servants. There are several new types of settings too. Some affect the visual appearance of the dialogue box, others affect the golden sparkle particles that show up when a character speaks. There's also a setting that changes the speed of all reputation and resource related pop-ups. Another setting makes it possible to save the location of the pop-up bars between game rooms and menus. If this setting is turned off, all bars are pulled in if a menu that has a red exit cross is opened. The last but very time-consuming improvement we made was to remove the weird grey pixelated outline of all sprites that had any sort of transparency, which is basically every single sprite in the game, except for backgrounds. This is something that we probably wouldn't have been aware of at all if not for 2 things. My laptop displaying things in the game differently than all other computers we've tried the game on, and this video which showed us that the drawing program we both use has something weird going on in its alpha channel, which creates these weird grey outlines. The solution to this was to take every single sprite with transparency, let me repeat, basically every sprite in the entire game, and re-export it with GIMP. This meant that hundreds upon hundreds of sprites had to be re-exported and then added to the game. I'm still not done adding the player character sprites, but I'm saving that for when I'll start working on the character creator update. If you made it this far into the video, congratulations! You'll be rewarded with some good news. all of Mistwinter-based 32 Townsfolk are done. That means that all of these things have been added to the game for each of those 32 characters. That's a massive milestone that represents the completion of a significant percentage of the game's content. I can't tell you how happy I am that they're done, because it's been hard to work on them at times. I love writing, it's been my biggest hobby for most of my life, but even I have trouble staying motivated when writing for the game sometimes, which is a problem since most of the work consists of writing. But I manage, thanks to something called discipline and years of experience. With the completion of the Townsfolk, it's pretty easy to see that the finished version of Mistwinter Bay will be one of the biggest games ever made in terms of story content and amount of dialogue. Let me show you some statistics on how big the Townsfolk stories are. All of the 32 Townsfolk story content, plus the foreign leaders' first 3 hangouts, I forgot to remove those when I counted, so that's why they're here, add up to a total of 1,137,000 words with lines of code. Without code, that's about 817,000 words. Of those 817,000 words, I've written 685,000 across 26 characters, plus the 6 foreign leaders' first 3 hangouts. And my sister has written 132,000 words across 6 characters. For comparison, the Lord of the Rings trilogy has about 481,000 to 576,000 words, depending on which Google search result you look at. With those measurements, the 817,000 words of Townsfolk stories in Mistwinter Bay is 1.4 to 1.7 times the length of the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. As another comparison, Larian Studios has said that Baldur's Gate 3 has about 3 times the word count of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. If we look at the number of choices presented in the Townsfolk stories, there are a minimum of 1027 choices. 320 of those are purple, with the other 707 being golden. I say that it's a minimum of 1027 choices since I counted options in personal quests and negative reputation events on the low end. I also didn't count any instances where you get the option to send characters out. Any such instance will lead to at least 2 different paths based on success or failure. So yes, the final version of Mistwinter Bay is going to be big. And it should also be obvious at this point that we're not going to make any sort of DLC or content updates once the game is properly released. We will of course fix bugs and stuff, but not add anything to the game. It will have plenty of content in it already. In fact, there's so much content in the game that not even we as developers can understand it or see it properly, since so much of it is related to characters. The fact that it's so hard to see that content is actually the main contributor to any instances of demotivation we feel when working on the game. For months on end, it felt like we didn't really make any progress because we couldn't see it clearly in the game. It wasn't like any of the updates I've shown off in this video. Those updates make it seem like we've done a lot more in the past few months than we did before that, but that's not the case at all. Those are just improvements that are easy to see visually in the game, whilst all of the story stuff is more easily shown off by word counts in documents or check marks on lists. And that's all I have to say for now. A big thank you for sitting through this video to the end. A massive thank you to our patrons for your continued support. This is usually when I should tell you about the game's demo on Steam and itch, but if you watched this far, you probably already played it. And if you haven't, I recommend that you don't. It's severely outdated in terms of quality of life, as this video has demonstrated. So I'll just sign off by giving another thank you, and I'll see you another time.